Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space, and thank you for joining us for today's event, Uyghurs at the Crossroads, Culture, Oppression, and Global Response. And to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from fourth space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Here at fourth space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions and projects in development across the university. We're running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting, so we welcome any comments or questions via the chat. And for those of you here in this space, if you'd like to participate, just let us know and we'll get a microphone to you. And with that, it's very much my pleasure to hand it over to a recent member of the International Support for Uyghurs, Akita. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to International Support for Uyghurs event in collaboration with Fourth Space Concordia, Uyghurs at the Crossroads, Culture, Oppression, and Global Response. International Support for Uyghurs is a nonprofit organization that aims to support the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims facing oppression and persecution by the Chinese government in East Turkestan. ISU organizes many advocacy projects, such as this event, in the hopes of gaining a local response to the situation in East Turkestan. ISU is the voice of many Uyghurs who have been affected by the Uyghur genocide. The genocide in East Turkestan is a deeply tragic and concerning event that has accumulated international attention, but not enough. The Uyghur population has been subjected to multiple counts of severe human rights abuses and cultural suppression. As I speak to you guys now, there are currently up to 3 million Uyghur detainees in the government-controlled concentration camps. These camps were essentially created to supposedly re-educate Uyghurs and other Turkic groups in East Turkestan. However, that is not the case, as the detainees face the grim reality of daily physical and psychological abuse and torture, along with being forced to renounce their Uyghur identity and religion and adopt Chinese identity and communist propaganda in these concentration camps. Women in these facilities have to undergo forced sterilization and endure grave instances of sexual abuse. The Uyghur children whose parents have been detained are brought to state-run orphanages, which are similar to the Canadian residential schools. In these orphanages, the Uyghur children are forced to renounce their Uyghur identity and are forbidden from speaking the Uyghur language. This genocide aims to eradicate the rich and beautiful Uyghur culture. Through this event, we hope to save the endangered Uyghur population and spread awareness of this humanitarian crisis. Now, I'll be welcoming our moderator, Dr. Kimberley Manning. Dr. Manning is the principal of the Simone de Beauvoir Institute, a professor of political science and women's studies. Dr. Manning specializes in gender politics with a particular focus on China's revolutionary past. Her new book, titled The Party Family, Revolutionary Attachments and the Gendered Origins of the State Power in China, has just been published by Cornell University Press.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today to take part in this important event, Uyghurs at the Crossroads, Culture, Oppression, and Global Response, which has been organized by the ISU, or the International Support for Uyghurs, at Fourth Space as part of this digital art exhibition. Today, we gather here to share our voices regarding the ongoing genocide, the Uyghur genocide, which is currently happening under the rule of the Chinese government. And we're looking to give you a glimpse of the suffering that's taken place, but also of, I think, the realities and perhaps the joys as well of a people who've been very resilient in the face of so much. In October 2022, the ISU team started thinking about organizing an event that could showcase the reality of Uyghur people in a powerful and engaging way. And they've since worked hard to make this plan a reality. Since last spring, they have spent almost every weekend brainstorming and discussing ideas about this project while approaching many people and institutions to facilitate this process. They have collected over 250 pictures or photos and carefully selected about 40 for this digital exhibition. They've also created 6 short videos focusing on the history, culture, and recent and current political situation of the Uyghurs. The robust collection of photographs and videos illuminates real human stories and the devastating impact of the Uyghur genocide resulting from modern-day colonialism. The digital art exhibition will be presented after our panel discussion. Now I would like to introduce our very distinguished panelists. Dr. Susan J. Palmer is a researcher and writer in the field of New Religious Studies. She is an affiliate professor and lecturer in the Religions and Cultures Department at Concordia and a lecturer at McGill University School of Religious Studies. She is the author of numerous books and studies, notably Moon Sisters, Krishna Mothers, Rajneesh Lovers, Women's Roles in New Religions, Aliens Adored, Rails UFO Religion, The Heretics of France, The Nuobian Nation, Black Spirituality and State Control, and more recently, Storming Zion, Government Raids on Religions. I would like to note that she's got a forthcoming book, Uyghur Women Activists in the Diaspora, Restoring a Genocide, which will be published by Bloomsbury, UK, in the next few months. I'd also like to welcome to our panel this afternoon, Dr. Adalyat Issiyeva, who holds a Bachelor's of Music from Almaty State Conservatoire from Kazakhstan and a Master's and PhD from McGill University. Her doctoral dissertation and studies focus on Russian Orientalism in music and culture and have been funded from many different sources, including the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, from the Quebec Funding Agency and McGill University. She's published numerous articles in journals and collections, and her book right here, Representing Russia's Orient, was published in 2020 by Oxford University Press and explores the implications of 19th century Russian music with Oriental subjects and the influence of music and culture of Russia's Eastern others on the creation of Russian musical identity. And her most recent research is addressing the formation and totalitarian control of musical identities of Soviet Central Asian ethnicities under the Stalin regime. And then finally, I'd like to welcome Mr. Qayyum Masimov, who I've known now for 4 years, 5 years, something like that, 5 years now, yeah. Who was born in a family of Uyghur refugees in the former USSR. Mr. Masimov has been actively engaged in the East Turkestan independence movement since his early childhood. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the Oriental Studies Institute in Tashkent and a master's degree in economics from Vanderbilt University. He is actively engaged in Canadian Uyghur community affairs and has assisted in many immigration and refugee cases with the provincial and federal courts. Mr. Masimov served as head of the Uyghur Canadian Association from 2012 to 2015 and participated in numerous parliamentary hearings dedicated to the Uyghur cause. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to start, I think, talking a little bit about some of the political situation, and then we're going to move more into perhaps some of the cultural dimensions of Uyghur identity and its current formations. So, you know, we know now that the situation for Uyghurs under Chinese rule has deteriorated dramatically over the last 7 to 8 years, but I think in particularly beginning in 2017. And Canada has taken up or stood up and taken notice of what's taken place. But how effective has Canada's responses been? And this includes sanctions and diplomatic pressure in addressing the Uyghur issue. Is it having any impact? You know, how are things going to date? Yeah, I think probably we'll start with you. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? I would say it's mixed results. I'm very proud as a Quebecer, as a Canadian, that our parliament was the first legislative body in the world to recognize, to acknowledge Uyghur genocide. It happened in 2021. Once again, Canada was the first country to initiate special refugee resettlement program for Uyghurs. M62, 10,000 refugees will be coming starting next year. But having said this, we as a civil society, we demand more, of course, and then we can see that there are big deficiencies, especially when it comes to the importation of Uyghur products, Uyghur forced slave labor products entering Canada. I would say that in parallel, US authorities, they have introduced UFLPA, called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And since then, within the last 20 months, they have seized merchandise worth more than $5 billion, just as an example. And at the same time, Canada has seized confiscated merchandise. So there's a lot to cover, and we should not rest as a civil society. We have to be vigilant. And I mean, the events like this, it is one more step in highlighting this.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to further steps that can take place right now, I mean, you've talked about the need for perhaps greater attention and monitoring, not only monitoring to the supply chains, but then the action that needs to follow with respect to results. But what are other ways that national and international organizations what are other ways in which they can be better coordinating their actions for putting ongoing pressure onto China in particular? Either of you?
Okay, maybe I'll start and then I'll pass it to. This is my personal opinion, but the beauty, quote unquote, of the Uyghur file is that it is so multidimensional. It is far beyond the question of one ethnic group, because there is a big elephant in the room, which is China, Chinese Communist Party. So I can name just a few topics which comes to my mind right now: artificial intelligence and surveillance, organ harvesting, intimidation and harassment of ex-Chinese citizens, Canadian citizens, for their activism in Canadian soil. We talk about cultural assimilation. We talk about forced labor products entering Canada. And as a result of it, we as Canadians, all of us, become complicit indirectly in supporting the ongoing genocide by purchasing with our own money products made by forced labor. And I would like to touch base on that later on during my presentation. So the issues are very multidimensional, very complex, but at least we have to start addressing it by talking and naming it. And then we will be seeing more action, more concrete action. There are some legislations right now in the parliament which have to be strengthened. There are some laws which have to be followed up, because we have these laws, but they are not followed up. They are not implemented. So maybe that's the deficiencies which we have to cover.
Well, I think Canada just has to become generally more aware of what's happening in East Turkestan. And, we've had a long history of, well, for example, the Chinese stole the technology from Nortel. That was very embarrassing. And it took a long time for Trudeau to say no to Huawei. And I think there has to be more pressure from the people on the government, and there just has to be more awareness of the Uyghur plight. I gave a lecture at Dawson College about my forthcoming book. There are flyers there, by the way. By the way, it's not my book. It's also Dil Murat's book.
Oh, yeah.
He's
sorry.
the co-author,
Yeah.
and also Abdul Muqtadir, who's not here today.
Yeah.
So it's 3 authors, which is on Uyghur women activists. And I was really surprised how there were about 300 students in the room, and only 3 people had heard of the Uyghurs.
Mm.
And that was just 6 months ago. And this is in Dawson College. And I talked actually with Qayyum and Razia, this other Uyghur activists in Ottawa, about the possibility of designing a comic book for high school students with a story of the genocide, or even for kids, you know. There have to be ways of educating the Canadian public. That's so important. And well, I guess that's, oh yeah, the other thing that's really interesting is we have to support, I'm sort of jumping to another question here, but I think we have to support the Uyghurs in Canada at sort of creating their institutions, their mosques, their schools. And for example, in Chateauguay, they have a Saturday school where they teach their kids the Uyghur language and dances and songs. And I went to visit it with my research assistants 2 years ago, which is actually how I got interested, were one of the first steps to writing that book. So I think, you know, more publicity about the school. Like I intend to write an article about the Uyghur language schools for kids. I went to visit the one in Washington, D.C., and I know there's one in Vancouver, and I think there's one in Calgary or something. So I think just writing an article about that, like a popular article, and also looking at well, I've already looked at these Uyghur women activists who are women in their 40s and 50s, but there's a whole new generation of young Uyghur activists in Canada, you know, young women and men. And it would be great to write about I'm going to write an article about what they're doing. So, and also to help Uyghurs need advice about how to apply for money from the government for projects, you know, for, well, to start businesses or to start schools or to I don't have various teaching and well, anyway, I'm sure we could, there are lots of things we can do in Canada to welcome the immigrants who are coming in and to help them, you know, establish a community here.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I also wanted to add, since we're having this talk at the university level, I thought that maybe some professors will watch this panel as well. I wanted to encourage maybe university professors to encourage their students to do some research, to question some, the sources of money that are coming to and passing through the different administration and agencies in Canada, and do at the local level, you know, introduce Uyghur culture, like I'm trying to do in my music department at McGill University. I'm teaching musicianship class, and I'm just putting some Uyghur songs for students to listen to, and we're just paying attention to different aspects of it, and at the same time I'm introducing not only Uyghur but all other cultures through the music, and I think that's important to just raise awareness about multiple faces that we have in Canada. They are coming and they want to be a part of it, but sometimes they don't know how to be the part of it, and want to participate in the development. And so we could invite them gently, and at the same time invite Canadians born here to introduce different ways of communication, because sometimes I'm feeling we're living in our own diaspora, many of us, because of lack of knowledge and stuff, but also because of the burden that many Uyghurs are carrying, especially the ones who are coming from East Turkestan, the trauma that they're carrying, and this fear of any authorities. Many people are still scared to see people in a uniform. That's as simple as that. It's such a deep, in subconsciousness. So we just have each of us could do little steps towards this communication. Yeah.
Oh, right. No, I don't need. I forgot. Okay, well, some really interesting pieces that I think are emerging that I'd like to just tie in a little bit. So you mentioned that we're anticipating 10,000 Uyghurs coming to Canada next year. Is that correct? It's forecast for next year, is that right?
The program designed to resettle 10,000 Uyghur and other Turkic Muslim.
Okay, and other Turkish.
That is like Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Tatar people and other like those of Chinese citizenship.
Yeah.
And it would be within 3 years.
Okay,
starting
so
next year.
But starting next year over 3 years. This is actually a pretty profound development, because there are not many Uyghurs in Canada right now, right? There's how many right now would you estimate?
Well, we don't have exact data. Our best estimate, it's roughly under 2,000.
Yeah.
Spread out across Canada.
Right.
Major patterns like major metropolitan areas like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, very classic immigration pattern. And I would say that Uyghurs are the probably newest and youngest and smallest ethnic diaspora in Canada.
So that's huge in and of itself, given the dimensions of the genocide that's been unfolding over the last 5 years, that the community here in Canada, for Canadians just to understand what a tiny community we're talking about, and yet how strong that community has been I think we can say that there's not nearly enough attention that's been focused on this issue, but I do want to recognize the tireless work of Uyghurs in Canada, because it's thanks to your advocacy that the Canadian government was the first to stand up and condemn, to name the genocide that's underway. So first of all, I just want to commend your work and the work of so many other advocates, because that's truly a remarkable achievement.
Sorry, I might be seems to be stealing the show, but I have to correct here. I believe China is the first victim of its own success. If it was not for Chinese policies towards ethnic people, Uyghurs in particular, this would not have happened. So China was so successful in putting up these concentration camps, putting millions away, tearing apart 1 million children from their parents, and this is ongoing. It didn't finish. It's still ongoing. That at one point, diaspora came to conclusion that there are no other way. There is no possible coexistence with Chinese Communist Party, and because there is no activity possible within East Turkestan. So the diaspora outside felt like we are the voice for voiceless people. We have to voice it and double it, triple our efforts. So maybe that was the driving force behind these campaigns. And maybe one small anecdote I'd like to share with you. In early 2000s, when we first went to Ottawa and met with Global Affairs Chinese desk people for the first time, and we start explaining Uyghur issue, that we are facing such and such hardships. China is doing this, China is doing that. The first question, so we've been asked by these so-called quote unquote professionals, who are you guys? What is Uyghur? And we talk about Chinese desk and Global Affairs, supposedly professionals who should know this subject, and they've been asking us, who are you guys? Fast forward 2021, the first parliament in the world recognized Uyghur genocide, and 10 more states followed. But we should not rest. There's so much more to cover.
Yes, I interviewed a young woman whose mother is an activist. Well, she is too. And she said when she first came to Canada, she went to school. I think this is in grade 2. The children were told to bring in stories about where they came from, but to bring a map and point to the country they came from and talk about their language and their heritage. And of course, there are a lot of kids from immigrant families in the class. But when she started to talk about East Turkestan, people just looked blank and they said, where's that? I never heard of it. And the teacher rolled up this big map and she couldn't find it on the map. And she felt really upset and she went home and talked to her mother. And they said, well, this is really a problem. You have to explain to them what the political situation is. But it's very hard for a kid in grade 2, you know. So that shouldn't have to be a problem for, you know, kids growing up here.
Yeah, maybe a little anecdote from my life also. I came here more than 25 years ago, and it was the end of the 90s. I also went through all the linguistic schools, French, English, and the first thing I did on a presentation is to talk about us, to explain who we are. Any concerts or any events that are organized by schools, we were bringing, you know, maps and trying to wear our dresses and talk about and dance. I had to dance. Although I'm not a dancer and not a singer, but I saw nobody around me to introduce my culture. And there was like not, the videos were not circulating as widely as they do today. So we had to kind of organize little ensembles and perform. And so I also remember the same question about the map. So everybody knows about Tibet. Yeah, and so it is within China, and they face oppression, and this is because of some popular movies like 7 Years in Tibet, yeah, with Brad Pitt, and so on. So I think like Uyghur case should go into kind of mass culture. I've been always thinking of Hollywood making some kind of movie about you know, Uyghur resistance, or just about any historical you know, figures that we have plenty of, and we're about to forget, unfortunately. So.
So I think, you know, just to circle back in terms of where we've been and then what needs to happen next. Just a couple of comments. One, we have these very small numbers of Uyghurs who are living in Canada. And I have to say too, that to become an advocate, to press for changes, especially for those who have family who are still in East Turkestan, is to take huge risks, right? And so there are layers and layers here because of the tremendous challenges for being open out of fear of what would happen to family back home. And this is a chill, for Uyghurs, it's life and death in many cases. But this is a chill also that extends to many parts of the People's Republic of China, and particularly since 2017, we've seen across the board an increase in surveillance and repression within academic circles as well. And it's something that I've never experienced before in all of my years doing research in the People's Republic of China, that we've gone from, things have shifted so dramatically, I would say, over the last 10 years. And, you know, on that note, I think as Canadians, in some ways, to think about the ways in which our peoples are now tied together, and will increasingly become tied together in the coming years as we prepare to welcome as many as 10,000, though hopefully it will be more than that. I mean, we can maybe say this is a starting point. But what is going to be involved? What is the responsibility of Canadians who are already here in terms of preparation? And, you know, your idea, Susan, of a graphic novel, I think is actually a brilliant idea. And I would love to see those who are involved in education or who have talents in this area maybe actually think about working on like finding some way of getting funding and developing that idea, because I do think you're right. I think we need to find ways in which we can create cultural footholds for dialogue and for explanation why East Turkestan does not appear on a map, right? When you're looking at Asia, for example. A graphic novel is potentially one way of beginning to do that. Music is another. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the current cultural dimensions. What is being done either inside East Turkestan or outside of East Turkestan to try and protect language, religious practice, music. How are those? How is that resistance playing out in this current moment, inside or outside of East Turkestan?
Well, in the UK, we have Rahima Mahmoud, who's a leading activist. She's in our book, and when she first came to England, she got a student scholarship to come and study hotel management of all things. And she would just talk to people about the Uyghurs, and everyone would say, never heard of that, what? And today she's with a dance troupe and a music troupe called the Silk Road. They're working with SOAS, that university, and they perform. She's a singer. She does traditional Uyghur songs. So her activist career is also mixed up with her musical career, because she gives people a taste of the Uyghur culture so they can see how beautiful it is and how interesting and how worth preserving it is. And then she talks about what needs to be done. And she's also a translator for many BBC documentaries on what's happening in China. And so she has a really amazing career, actually. So yes, and I think graphic novel is a great idea, because I saw a graphic novel about Mirigul Tursun. In fact, her picture is on my flyer there for the book. And she was a camp survivor, one of the first female camp survivors to go public. And her story is very powerful because she got on a plane to go visit her parents in Beijing, and the police stopped her at the airport and took away her triplets who were only 3 months old.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And that's a very dramatic story.
It is, yeah.
So this is such a simple little, almost babyish cartoon of her life, and it's so powerful. It tells so much, so efficiently about what's going on. And then there was another one of Zumrat Dawood, written by a Arabic. The first one was a Japanese animator, and the second one was a Muslim artist. And it's also very powerful about Zumrat's story, who was also another camp survivor, also in our book. And it's just a very, very efficient way of telling a story. And then people want to know more.
And potentially a very moving way as well. I'm thinking of the graphic novel Mouse. I forget the author's name, but that was written about the Holocaust, and that novel has been incredibly influential in bringing in a very, my understanding, brilliant way of portraying the horrors of the Holocaust, but to a whole new generation of young people, and so it's finding ways to share these very hard truths with older and younger people, to bring their awareness to what is currently taking place. Yeah, thank you. Do you want to add on?
Well, my personal opinion that I find it's very ironic that apparently in Japan, most of adults, they learn about Russian literature, reading Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, by going through mangas. So I don't think this is like very academic way to do that. But hey, we live in the modern world where the attention span is so short. So maybe graphic design is one of the answers to possible, educating for educational purposes. I'm thinking of, different scenarios. And, I would strongly encourage, let's say, students, let's say at Concordia, to go and investigate your own endowment fund, for example. Students at McGill, they've been studying where the money that every student pays ends up. And they found out last year that $160 million of McGill's endowment fund invested in Chinese stock market. They're directly linked with the companies which construct concentration camps. This is a study which was done by McGill students per se. So I would strongly encourage students at your own institution to do some background study on that. And if you wish to learn more about this project, we have launched under Europe. It's called Clean Universities, and we're trying to mobilize support across Canada and Canadian movement among universities to demand withdrawal of investment funds from China. Because you as a student with your own tuition money, you subsidize ongoing genocide. You do not know where this money going when you invest in China. And this money goes into purchasing surveillance equipment, into the DNA sequencing testing on Uyghurs, on concentration camps construction, etc., etc. And I think that, if students only aware of that fact, they would not be in accordance, they would not give their consent to do that. They would demand this money to be withdrawn. You don't want profit from dirty profit. This is just one small step, which we can elaborate more in details, but there's so much. And the first step starts with education, with general knowledge and awareness.
Adalyat, do you want to add to some of the cultural dimensions of ways in which?
Yes, I was going to address it a little bit in my talk, but I'll just go ahead a little bit in advance and maybe mention that there are Chinese sites selling Uyghur costumes, and all the models are Chinese, actually not Uyghurs, and they are kind of in a way pervert our tradition, our heritage, because let's say male costumes, the male models are wearing parts of the female costume. So by doing this, they are feminizing the other, something that has been done by other colonial countries as well, but this is blatant, and this has been done in the 21st century, and quite easy maybe to question it, and maybe comment on it, or maybe do some research on how this culture been distorted, assimilated, and eventually maybe even erased. So we're on the edge of being kind of refashioned and erased. So we need to question anything that comes from China, from official sources. Again, from my talk, but I'll go into details later on. But some of the Chinese institutions are publishing in papers, official Western papers, some kind of a lie, sometimes really open statements that have nothing to do with Uyghur history, and those journals surprisingly accept this kind of made-up knowledge, and they don't even have sometimes any disclaimer note or anything. So, and I remember from my own experience when I tried to publish an article in French journal at the beginning of 2003 or 2002, I was rejected because the journal believed that I express, the feelings of my nation, of my people, and I'm too, nationalistic maybe. But they don't do anything. They don't stop this information, coming from the official Chinese sites, and that really kind of should be, I think, addressed at some point.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to, speaking about the preservation of cultural heritage, we've talked quite a bit about some different dimensions, steps that Canadians can take potentially to also be supporting. I'm wondering if maybe we can just spend the last few minutes talking about the current political conditions. I mentioned that sometimes it's difficult for Uyghurs living in Canada to feel like they can speak openly about what's going on because of their worry about what's happening back home. That this is something that's not just Uyghurs facing this. This is some Chinese Canadians as well are facing this. Iranians as well. It's something that can be surprising, I think, for Canadians to think about the fact that there could be repression taking place or even self-censorship that's taking place in Canada out of fear of what could be happening back home. And I'm wondering if any of you want to talk about that a little bit, that what is the climate and how can Canadians try to make our democracy stronger at this moment in time?
Let me start. Sometimes, like most of the time, we think that, the diaspora is in need from Canada and we asking something from Canada. But I would like to reverse table and say, we as a diaspora and exiled refugees, we are here to serve Canada. And I'll give you some example about Chinese police stations, harassment and intimidation. We've been signaling this for the last 20 years. I remember in 2007, I gave an interview to McLean Journal, and the title was very much revealing. The title was "The Big Beijing Brother is Watching." Imagine 15 years ago, at diaspora, we've been signaling it to our elected officials, to our security forces. Guys, this is serious, this is happening. Nobody listened to us. 10 years ago, we started signaling about concentration camps. And at the time, we've been told, don't overstretch, you're overreacting, it cannot be. We talked about organ harvesting. We talked about, daily experiences we as a diaspora have experiencing day in, day out. I wish our people who are in charge of decision makers, they would listen to us then. We talked about this last spring. There was a scandal involved about the MP Michael Chong. He'd been supposedly spied upon. Consulate diplomatic mission people here in Canada. This is not something new. This is very much public secret. We knew about it. We signaled. I had meeting personally, maybe on 5 occasions with CISIs in Canada, briefing them and bringing other diaspora members and letting them tell firsthand information what is happening. Unfortunately, there is so much we have to cover, and there's more about vigilance. And we as a diaspora, we are here as any other diaspora ethnic groups, let's say Hong Kongers, Tibetans, and Iranians, and Russians to the extent, and others. I just wish that our officials be more attentive to what we have to say. And we are saying it for a long time, credible information, checked, verified information. And by just listening to us, Canada can be much more in secure position, much more, pronounced, and it can act more with more strength in international diplomacy, etc. So just that's my suggestion, that we are there, we are here to inform, because we have experienced this dictatorship. We don't want this happening in Canada.
I think we should help people get their stories out. I read some really powerful and fascinating stories about, for example, that young Uyghur model who was arrested and thrown in a camp, and they sort of said he was using drugs, which wasn't true, and he managed to somehow get in touch with his he had a secret cell phone, and he got in touch with his uncle and sent out photographs from the camp. And he was this beautiful young man who has just disappeared. And there's the people who've, we did a project at McGill as part of our research where we did a survey on Uyghurs in Canada. And you can read it on the JCREOR, JCREOR, just put in Uyghurs survey and my name or something, you'll find it. And we sent out, you know, a sondage, a survey to find out what, you know, where people lived, why they left China, what they were hoping to find when they got here, and whether or not they're practicing Muslims now, and if they want their children to marry other Uyghurs, all sorts of questions like that. So we got a good sense of who these people were, and then we conducted interviews with about 30 people, and they were such amazing characters. They had such amazing stories. Like one man was he was a language professor at Xinjiang University, and then they changed the rules and they said they weren't allowing Uyghur students, and that he taught a course on Uyghur poetry and culture, but thing was translated into Chinese. And so anyway, just great stories like that. And I think we have to find ways of communicating them. And so people will care, people will know.
Thank you. Do you have any last words that you would like to share? You've given I think some really good ideas in terms of what we at Concordia can do in terms of looking at our endowment fund. And I think we've talked also as well about the possibility of Concordian students getting involved in doing research, perhaps supporting advocacy measures. Are there other recommendations moving forward that you would either like to ask for people's involvement or to share anything that we haven't touched on in the last hour?
That's something. Well, I thought that we not only have to advocate the current situation with Uyghurs, but we also I would like to see more of the support of Uyghurs who came here with their cultural baggage. We have some great musicians, some great dancers living in Toronto, in Montreal, who are giving up their profession just because they have to work somewhere, they have to survive. I understand that that's a normal path for any immigrant, but with we're facing dying tradition because in China, in East Turkestan, Uyghurs are not allowed anymore to perform dastans or mukams the way it is traditionally performed. And yet we have dancers and musicians who came long ago, 20 years ago. They've been trained in East Turkestan long ago, so they have this kind of original type of tradition. They've preserved it, and they could have passed it to and share it with other Uyghurs here, but also with other Canadians. I'm going to show you some videos of Uyghur dancing. It's fascinating, and but there is no way to support them financially. I know one of my friends, she's teaching on Zoom, and she has only 5 or 6 students, taking Uyghur dance, which is very deplorable. And she was about, almost like she was thinking of quitting of her profession. And I know, like, she's such a great person, and she knows all different tradition, like types of dance, regional ones, and she's like able to do anything. But because of this money, no support, some money could have helped her, maybe like to open her own school, and to teach not only Uyghur but other dances as well. But that's something because I'm thinking of always, like, from my perspective, because I'm a musician, and I'm thinking of cultural kind of support. So,
Thank you.
My message would be mostly addressed to Chinese ethnic Canadian Chinese diaspora. You live in the freedom in Canada, and you have this room to maneuver, so to speak. I would encourage the Chinese diaspora to be more proactive in advocating for Uyghurs, because what is happening with the Uyghurs, this is testing ground. This, for example, surveillance technology, which was tested on us, it's been implemented in Hong Kong. It's been spread to Tibet. This is pretty much now it is a norm in interior China. So, I spoke to one Chinese professor, ethnic Chinese professor of history, and one thing he said that it is mostly because of you people. He was referring to nomadic Uyghur Turkic people. We've been able to consolidate as a nation. We have built this great wall of China, separating north from south, and that was a legacy of Qin Shi Huangdi and etc. So by wiping out this ethnicity, I believe China is destroying part of its own identity. In the long term, if you think about it, this is big, of course, this is big loss for Uyghurs. We might, as an ethnic group, as we are experiencing ethnocide right now, we might disappear in 20, 30 years from now. But this is a huge, irreparable damage to the whole humanity. So what we do here in Exile, we try to preserve that heritage. We try to digitalize, collect these documents, books, periodicals, language, and as Adalyat said, music samples, etc. So much to do and so little time left. And maybe on this pessimistic, gloomy note, I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Well, I think what I'd like to do now, it's coming up to 4 o'clock, and this has been quite a moving discussion, and I want to thank all three of you for coming and sharing with us today, for all the work that you do and continue to do in your efforts to bring attention to the plight of the Uyghurs, but also the gifts that they bring, and again, and just to say also that I remain very much in awe of your work and what you've been able to do in such a very short period of time, and in the face of such a challenging opponent in the form of the Chinese Communist Party. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody as well who was present today. Thank you. So I think that we're shifting gears, and so I'm not sure who's taking over the moderating of the event now. Is there? I think you're taking over. Are you presenting something?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead. Then our next speaker is Qayyum.
I was introduced already.
Yes, already. Yes.
So I'll take the Okay. Today's presentation, I would like to present this team, our audience. It's about forced labor. This is something more concrete. It's less academic. It is more my personal observations and some work we have done as a Europe. So once again, I represent Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project. It's an NGO based in Ottawa. We do advocacy and we do awareness raising, on Uyghur plight. So next, please. So let's start over what is Turkestan, what is Xinjiang, and what is Uyghur slave labor, and why is that? It is a category by itself. It is very different what we might have experienced when we deal with corporate greed. The East Turkestan, since occupation, we've been experiencing slow pace assimilation and genocide, but it's been even more pronounced within the last 10 years. since arrival of Xi Jinping, once he came to the head of the Communist Party in China. And why Uyghur slave labor is a category by itself? Because when we talk about slave labor, when we talk about slave labor and forced labor, very often we associate such malpractices with certain individual companies' interests and malpractices. Whether for China and for Uyghurs, particularly under People's Republic of China, we talk about widespread state-sponsored systematic slavery. The closest parallel I have in my mind, that would be North Korean laborers, when the North Korea as a state imposed slavery on its own citizens. I'd like to touch base on Canada's action and inaction, what have been done, what are the challenges. I'd like to talk about international obligations under Geneva Convention, to which Canada is a signatory state, and probably public awareness will be the last topic I'd like to touch base. Next, please. So what in 2023, November, what do we know? What do we know? And I'd like to avoid being opinionated and share my opinions. I'd like to base my presentation on facts, commonly acknowledged by most of international institutions. So here I'm relying on UN estimates that puts more than 1 million ethnic Uyghurs being detained. UNHCR report stated that crimes against humanity might be happening. And we, as an exiled diaspora, we say the numbers are much, much more, and the scope and the spread of the oppression is even deeper. It's even more like nefarious. 10 states been acknowledging this Uyghur genocide. The latest one is Taiwan. They acknowledged this past summer. And Canadian Parliament was the first legislative body to acknowledge this as a genocide. And when it comes to Uyghur forced labor, the particular mention was that the people in detention centers face torture or cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment or punishment, obligatory patriotic and cultural education, forced labor, arbitrary forced separation of children from their parents. So this is something I have mentioned earlier, close to 1 million Uyghur children being separated from their parents. While parents are sent to concentration camps, these kids are stationed within state-run orphanages where they're prohibited to speak in Uyghur, practice their religion, completely like brainwashed to become an exemplary Chinese, quote unquote. There are many reports, among them reports from ex-detainees I have personally interviewed on rape, sexual violence, and medical procedures, that is forced sterilization of Uyghur women, and forced marriages of Uyghur women to non-Muslim Chinese people. Next, please. So what is forced labor? Let's start from basics 101. So forced labor as defined by convention adopted back in 1930, it's about all work or service which is exacted from any person under menace of any penalty and for which the said person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. So this is clearly fits well into forced labor which has been applied on Uyghurs. So there are many forms of forced labor. Some of them are debt bondage, bonded labor, trafficking for labor and sexual exploitation. And, very often people are overpaid, or forced to work overtime, and they are underpaid or work for free. Next, please. Why is that Uyghur region is so different, and why is it Uyghur forced labor is so different from any other types of slavery? And this is very specific category which needs some specific measures to tackle it. So I'll give you an example. The cotton. By the way, I'd like to ask you guys, you wearing something like I see you wear something, t-shirts, cotton products. maybe if you can check the label and see made in China. Can you do that? Maybe ask your neighbor to check for you. I'm just curious. So cotton, 90% of Chinese domestic cotton comes from Uyghur region. And the cotton textile globally is 30%. 30% of cotton globally supplied by Uyghurs. Tomato and tomato products, 70% of tomato supply globally. So anytime you go to McDonald's, Subways, you put the ketchup Heinz, you buy the soup, what is it called? Soup, Campbell's soup, tomato soup. The chances are you consuming something which has been harvested, produced in part or in whole by slave force. Polysilicon, what is called green and clean, right? 50% of global supply. This is very trendy, especially among environmentally conscious Westerners. Oh, I have installed solar panel. I don't consume energy. I consume clean energy. But is it clean? We have to ask ourselves. Because polysilica, that's the main ingredient in the in the solar panels, comes from Uyghur region. 50% of the global supply. Imagine that, 50%. And the production, extraction, it is very much environmentally damaging. And people who do this, the very low paid or free labor, manual labor, hard labor, are not paid. And they work 17, 18 hours to crushing these stones. Red dates, 20% of global supply. Gloves, human hair, electric batteries. Tesla, by the way, opened recently in Urumqi city, its facility. Elon Musk, last year, they went more than 10 times to China to sign contracts with Chinese. He's building these electric vehicles, based on forced labor. So just to illustrate the scope and the magnitude of the problem. Next, please. So let's come back to Canada. What is its action and inactions? There are certainly many statements, public denouncements, like for example, in 2021, the Global Affairs came with so-called voluntarily reporting. Basically, Canada Global Affairs suggesting importers in Canada to declare, or pledge themselves that they will not be using products associated with Uyghur forced labor. And guess what? Big surprise, no company came forward pledging this or committing itself to it. Next, please. This part you have heard about already. This is again Canada saying, basically repeating what's been known already, but stating it officially. Next, please. So there was a declaration by Global Affairs 2021 that companies should report that they have made their due diligence and there is no forced labor in their products. There was a clause in federal contracts in procurement that there will be no such thing allowed purchased by Canadian government. The Canadian government came out with the idea of creating CORE, Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. It's been focused mainly on mining and garment industries. And the Canadian National Contact Point was introduced. And recently, March 2023, Canadian government in its annual budget proposal said that they will be eradicating forced labor from Canadian supply chain. And they specifically mentioned Uyghur case twice, which is never seen before. Very unusual for Canada, but they have mentioned Uyghurs in budget 2023. So having said this, we can testify that yes, there is awareness on part of the government and maybe to the less extent on the part of the public on the gravity of the situation and the involved with Uyghur genocide. Next, please. This year, earlier in May, the bill S211 was adopted. So basically this bill, it's been adopted by parliament, it became a law. So it forces companies to provide reports on their due diligence. And the possible penalty, if this company can be found guilty, is $250,000 penalty. Which, of course, for us, for the civil society, is not enough, and we consider this bill as a smokescreen, putting up good intentions but not following up with this legislation, because it is no-brainer. No Canadian will say openly, "I am for forced labor, I am for child labor," right? So the Liberal government adopted a bill which is very wishy-washy. It pleases everyone, but it does nothing. And then we've been criticizing this as not compatible with UFLPA, which is Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which was adopted by Americans almost 25 months ago. And under that UFLPA, Canada is failing on its international obligations under CUSMA agreement. And CUSMA stands Canada, US, Mexico Free Trade Agreement. There is no such thing as voluntary, because if you ask companies nicely, for example, Walmart, can you please provide evidence that your supply chain is free from forced labor? They will come out with a certificate with all possible stamps issued in China by Chinese Communist Party that this product is 100% kosher, halal, you can consume it, you can, there is nothing to be worried about. I mean, are we buying into that seriously? So far, there's nothing happened in Canada. Next, please. However, the US Customs, they start seizing cargo which been re-exported from Canada, imported goods, so it's Canada, showing that, albeit very small, but still, some merchandise originally from Uyghur region entering Canada and being re-imported to US. So right now, as of now, Canada is in breach of its own free trade agreement as per under CUSMA agreement. This slide actually, this comes from CBP government site. You can check it and you can see the Americans been very active and they've been banning all imports from Uyghur region into US. So what Chinese came out, they've been using Canada as a back door and trying to smuggle these imports into US. Next, please. So there was some attempts in the Ottawa to push and to adopt very robust legislation, S204, for example, which was imposing US-style ban on all imports manufactured or produced wholly or in part in Xinjiang. Unfortunately, this bill did not get any red carpet treatment like S211. And the reason why, because liberals do not want upset trade lobby in Canada. On a daily basis, just Walmart imports 400 containers of merchandise from Uyghur region into Canada on a daily basis. We talk about multi-billion-dollar trade. And we, as a Canadians, involuntarily subsidizing ongoing genocide because forced labor, concentration camps, it is an integral part of the genocide. People are not physically eliminated, killed, like it was the case during World War II. People are sent in millions, relocated, resettled by force from Uyghur region to work as slaves in interior China, where they subjected to work 17, 18 hours under paramilitary conditions, like under surveillance 24/7. This is the slavery we talk about. So this is a very much, phenomenal category. It is not individual corporate, practice. Next, please. So under CUSMA, which I have mentioned, Canada has obligations to commit itself eliminating all products associated with labor, with forced labor. And at the current, Canada is in breach of its own obligations, and that by itself creates friction with US. And US is being the largest trade partner with Canada, so that's something to consider. Next. So if you have any questions, please get in touch with me, and I will be happy to answer your questions and comments, and maybe some online questions might be coming. So I'm here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kayum, for your presentation. Do you have short questions related to Kayum's talk? Or we could launch on to the next presentation, to my presentation, which is more about cultural issues of Uyghurs, and then have a Q&A session after that.
If anyone has any immediate questions, just raise your hand. We can get a microphone to you.
Yes.
But otherwise,
Do you have a
afterwards.
question? Quick one. Okay, so then we could maybe move on to my presentation, which is entitled Uyghur Culture. Or maybe I should put this way. Uyghur Culture under the Communist Party control in Soviet Union and China. So as you know, for the last 150 or 200 years, Uyghurs have been subjects of colonial treatment, which included territorial dispossession, displacement, exploitation of land and human resources, social political control over the people, and many other. Despite continuous expression of disagreement with ruling forces and resistance to official policies and open revolts, Uyghurs have not been able to restore their freedom. So in the last decade, as you know, Uyghurs have faced the most severe control and psychological pressure from the Chinese Communist Party regime as physical and mental destruction in the so-called re-education centers. Not only the Uyghur bodies are subject to this destruction, the very Uyghur identity is under the threat. Chinese government tries to refashion and erase all the traces of Uyghur history, culture, language, and traditional way of life. But this is not the first time Uyghurs face the policies of deliberate identity manipulation and erasure. In this talk, I'll try to discuss different past and present attempts to assimilate, rewrite, and manipulate with Uyghur history and culture, and draw your attention to similarities between the Soviet Union and China's treatment of Uyghur culture and history. First of all, what constitutes Uyghur identity? There is no actually single answer to this question, since as any nation, Uyghurs are not homogeneous people or not single-voiced. So for some Uyghurs, Islam represents maybe like the pillar of a Uyghur identity. For others, Uyghur language and literature would be central. Yet for others, others would claim that Uyghur culture, customs, and traditions to be the most important. Well, since I was born actually and raised in the Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan, in my family of intellectual Uyghurs, my mother is a musician and father is a historian. For me, Uyghur identity is mostly about Uyghur culture and history. So first of all, I'd like to tackle Uyghur music. So mukam is one of the central traditions that Uyghurs would like to preserve, and they keep for centuries. And it represents maybe one of the most significant oral and literary tradition that dates back to several centuries ago. Some researchers believe that it is dated back to the 2nd century BC, and it became very popular during the Tang dynasty in the 7th century. So in the 16th century, Uyghur queen of Yarkand, Amenisa Khan, gathered Mukamchi, who are the performers of Mukam, across large territories of Eastern Turkestan in order to perform different varieties of Mukam. So she collected the best parts of the regional examples of Mukam and compiled from them the suite of 12 classical Uyghur Mukams. So 12 Mukams is a monumental cycle of 12 suites, which comprise the most valued Uyghur classical and folk poetry, as well as instrumental and vocal music and the classical dance. It takes approximately 24 hours to perform the full cycle of 12 Mukams. So we can understand actually the significance of this culture of Mukam through the common expression or reference to Mukam as the mother, and I quote, the mother of Uyghur music. Indeed, because of Mukam's kind of all-encompassing nature, it provides an inspiration for all other performing visual and literary arts. So poets such as Alisher Navai, Shah Mashrab, Fuzuli, and Zalil contributed their poems to this genre of music. In 2005, UNESCO has proclaimed the 12 Uyghur Mukams as, and I quote, a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. And please keep in mind this date and the language here. But it should be stressed that Uyghur Mukam is actually a living tradition. Music is based pretty much on improvisation, which changes each time it is performed, according to the context in which it is performed. Some parts of Mukam could be longer, other parts could be cut. And particularly the last section of Mukam, which is called Mashrab, very often performed outside of the concert type of tradition. So, but since 2005, because of UNESCO's inscribed heritage, Chinese treated Mukam with a colonial and paternalistic attitude. Now they control all performances of Mukam. They forbade to perform all the local, non-officially approved varieties of Mukam and prohibited to perform Mukam outside the official settings, which really contradicts the entire traditional practice of Mukam. Since 2017, several prominent Mukam singers and musicians and researchers and professors who do the studies on Mukam have been arbitrarily detained without charge, and the many institutions that studied Mukam history and culture, they've been closed. One of the Uyghur intellectual who is living now in the US explained, Chinese really authority is trying to terrorize everybody connected to arts and culture. They're like throwing them into the concentration camps and then showing people back, like performing Chinese songs and showing them how they've changed or been re-educated. And one intellectual explains this way. Many musicians were arrested because the Chinese government believed that singers, musicians, and artists are the main force that promotes Uyghur culture and nationalism. So they become the first target. When the regime targets artists, then ordinary people get frightened. Some people hid or destroyed their own musical instruments like dutar. They were afraid of getting arrested because of keeping an Uyghur musical instruments in their home. And that means that I am an Uyghur, not Chinese. It would be interpreted that this person stands against the ethnic harmony and unity policy. Let me just play, or maybe we won't have time to play Mukam, but you can find plenty of websites now playing this. But for the sake of time, I'll just skip this. So in the meantime, I should say that one of the most recent articles written or rather produced in 2019 by Chinese official institutions, claim Mukam that Mukam belongs to Chinese cultural heritage. And it's written right at the abstract of this article, which I have cited here. So this article entitled Study of China's Uyghur 12 Mukam in the Past 40 Years of Reform and Opening Up. And it states that Uyghur Mukam is one of the treasures of Chinese cultural heritage. After the founding of People's Republic of China, especially since the reform and opening up 40 years ago, with the care of the party and the government and the support of the leaders of all levels and relevant departments, great achievements have been made in the rescue, excavation, collation, and research of Uyghur Mukam. And of course, you can see here many ironies, what they have done, this rescue and excavation, was rather harming the tradition because of the breaking the tradition and not allowing to perform it outside the stage. But also, and as you can understand, and I've already told you that Mukam tradition was crystallized more than 500 ago, and it was crystallized, not created. It was created. It had its roots back to at least like Tang Dynasty, right? So, and it has nothing to do with Chinese Communist Party, but shockingly, this note was, this article was produced and published in the official Western journal, by Atlantis Press, which I made a short search. It is the publishing house related to France, and it was opened in 2006. And it is, kind of supposed to promote the independent studies and independent thinking, the science and experience. But yet there is no even note disclaiming that the journal might not be agreed with the author's beliefs or statements. So they just blatantly accept whatever is coming from the official institutions, which is quite upsetting, as I said. So it means that Western journals really support this colonial appropriation, yes, by simply publishing it, and they are kind of in line with this projects of erasure of Uyghur culture. So furthermore, there is an evidence that the textbooks and teaching materials that were used before at the Mukam program in the Art Institute are now banned, and they have been burnt during the major cleansing Uyghur language campaign in 2018. Now there is a restriction actually on teaching and performing Mukam in Uyghur language. The new rules of bilingual education in East Turkestan are aimed to replace all Uyghur language at all school levels. For Mukam, that means that Uyghur language singing must be strictly balanced by the singing in the Chinese language. And performances should be either include Chinese performers playing instruments, Uyghur instruments, or Uyghur performing Chinese tradition. So you can see this, this is kind of becoming a very deliberate policy of erasing of Uyghur cultural memory, gradual erasing. Another important part of Uyghur identity, musical identity, I should say, is its history of resistance. One genre of oral and written tradition called dastan has been traditionally associated with Uyghur past. So what are the dastans? Dastans are the epic-like narratives that recall most important moments of Uyghur history of confrontation against invaders. So dastans keep alive the names of the Uyghur heroes and places where they lived. This tradition of long narrative poems is actually very versatile. Besides the narratives on history or on heroes, there are dastans about love, yeah, about two lovers, and they are called muhabbat dastans, or religious dastans. So in China, it's been already for several decades. The historic and heroic dastans have been banned from public and private performance. So Uyghurs in China are allowed to perform freely only love dastans, yeah, which means that the larger part of dastan tradition might gradually fade into oblivion. Dastanchi, or those who perform dastans, have been also under very particular scrutiny by the Chinese authorities because of their kind of extended memory of Uyghur literature and of Uyghur history, and their respect and the wide popularity among all people. They represent threat to the new narratives that Chinese are trying to replace and create. So now I'd like to address maybe an assault on religion. So I'd like to play a little video of Uyghur imams dancing with the Chinese song called Little Temple. I think that's enough. Huh? So these are Uyghur imams, religious clerics that are asked to perform on the stage and dance with an accompaniment of Chinese hit that became very popular online. And this campaign started actually in 2015, a campaign of assaulting religion, campaign that really kind of bringing down, this religious body and kind of making fun of it. But what is more disturbing and frightening is the next video I wanted to show you. It is made by Xinjiang military police that have produced this video with the new lyrics. And the lyrics are talking about the mission that Chinese police is doing. And there is a footage of, Chinese police alternating with doing the raids, and at the same time they're dancing this little apple song.
日期巡逻也许有危险，家人也不能常伴身边。可是我心里未曾想过退缩，只为你平安每刻。日期巡逻也许有危险，家人也不能常伴身边。可是我心里未曾想过退缩，只为你平安每一刻。
And then they show how strong and unstoppable they are, and against all we know about the campaigns and the camps. That really is shocking. I think it really shocks me. There is another video of which was released just into 2 years ago, and this video shows how people are celebrating the end of Ramadan. Yes, and that is, the footage from May 2021. Sorry. So you see also on this video, I'm not gonna go through this because, I don't want to spend some time, but on the video you see a large crowd right in front of the mosque. They are dancing like crazy, but the mosque is empty, and there is a music, a little ensemble that is playing loud music, and all this to show, that the Uyghurs are living very happy life, and they're, Chinese are trying to kind of hide the reality behind these images. And And as you can imagine, these videos are not the expression of genuine feelings and genuine happiness, because, as you know, dance is considered haram or not very religious type of activity. So, and it's not really appropriate to perform, in front of a mosque or for imams to perform the dance. So it's really insulting kind of movement. So now I'd like to move to the tourism culture that Chinese are promoting now. Not only like Uyghurs are dancing in front of the mosques, but they are also dancing inside the mosque. You see one of the picture here on the right down, there is a beautiful girl. I don't know, maybe they're trying to suggest Buddhist whatever dance, but that is happening in a very mosque where Uyghurs are not allowed even to enter to worship, to perform their beliefs. So we can see that the Uyghur heritage and religion is used as a cultural resource to develop the tourism industry. The key religious sites preserved and presented as really tourist attraction sites, while the local people are unable to worship. And so the Uyghur culture is put onto this display for the tourist groups and song and dance spectacles. But what is striking here that people want to know more about this region, and so we need to kind of introduce it different ways. But the thing is that tourist initiatives are typically led by Chinese companies, and the benefits, of course, go directly to those companies, and that actually helps Chinese authorities to cover two important things. First of all, the growth of tourist facilities facilitates the movement of the Han Chinese into the region, and second, this kind of movement kind of provides justification for the respective securitization of the region. So they say, okay, there are commerce coming from central China, so we need to put more cameras and really chase each an Uyghur so that they don't harm them. So there is another interesting video that is been published in a tourist website, and I wanted to show you. It is entitled, "This is how simple happiness can be." And the commentary to this video is really precious. It says that on a bright sunny day, the children start to dance spontaneously with their arms waving in the air as soon as the music begins. Music is source of joy and relaxation that can put a broad smile on everyone's face. And here the video, here's the video. Sorry, I think the internet connection is slow, or I don't know why. Okay, but you got the picture. So you have two smiling children and probably his father accompanying them, and they're just so inviting. There is a bright day, and like everybody is living so happily. And of course, we know that the reality is not this. This was probably performed under the very strong suggestion, to say the least. That's very beautiful. But the same site, let me show you another. There is another video that is called Everyday Life of an Ordinary Citizen in Xinjiang. And so here you have a young man named Muhammadi, who works for the life insurance company, and he is like happy with his job and with his way of life. And that's, I think, in It is, I think, from Urumqi. So you see this man, throughout, I should probably skip. Background, the Western kind of music for different activities, sportive activities. So it's already, kind of displaced in terms of soundscapes of Uyghurs, traditional Uyghurs. And then, well, yeah. So I should probably do this. He's speaking Chinese, yeah, and he's wearing Western type of garments. Yeah, as well as his children, beautiful children. So he's saying like how great it is to be living in his situation. You see the translation, right? Then we see, him going to the restaurant, and that's, by the way, Chinese restaurants. They are eating, and what is most striking? Okay, he could have spoken Chinese to the camera because this is like a video aimed for the Chinese, I think, audience. But when he speaks with his children, it's also in Chinese. And that's what is showing, like a gradual transition or Sinicization of Uyghur culture and or Uyghur nation, yeah. And that's, this video is really disturbing because, it shows like the path that everybody else should take. Yeah, that's a clear suggestion, which is, quite disturbing. Okay, so now most of you are familiar with the videos issued by BBC from camps. Yeah. Here, the music culture really became a propaganda tool, yeah, because Chinese officials have been working on media publicity, trying to convince the world that they're not abusing Uyghurs. And they constantly release videos of Uyghurs playing and dancing to prove that they are safe and stable, and they're all so happy. And even the videos from the camp have this message. A very striking one. Right here, you see how they are 110. Just a second, I have to move on. Yeah. Probably.
So you think you know Uyghurs? Do you really?
Sorry, I have to wait for this. So that's what is happening in the camps, suggesting the media. So they're all dancing and singing and playing. Some are playing ravab, and some are even playing.
Is it your choice to be here?
Okay, I should skip to this. Yes. Exactly. So he's been beaten. That's very clearly, and but they have no other choice but to tell that they are happy and they've been extremists, and they are changing their minds right now. That's definitely there are evidences that Chinese authorities are forcing them to dance and play. So I was going to show you another part from this.
The study of China's tightening restrictions on
so
religion.
That's a camp survivor who is a Kazakh in ethnicity.
Muslims
Do you hear anything?
Dancing even inside these facilities that they call schools. What do you think?
Not manipulate the volume, but you can read it.
Өйткені ондайды өзіміз өткіздік, мен өзім өткіздім басымнан сол лагерьде жатқан кезде, егер қай-қайсың аузыңнан шығатын болса, сендер бұдан да қиын жерге кетесіңдер деп алдын ала келіп ескертеді. Сол себепті жаңағы о жердегілердің бәрі қорқады.
And so you see also later on how they're, one face that looks particularly unhappy about this, but what can she do about it? Okay, But when I'm reading most of these reports and I'm watching the news about Uyghurs being, tortured and or this manipulation with the culture, there is some other images from Chinese wearing Uyghur garments and selling, and there is a site that is like you will not find a single Uyghur model on it. But they are calling it a traditional Chinese Xinjiang Uyghur nationality clothes for men and for women. So it's becoming like a mass culture, totally appropriated by the colonial force and reshaped into something new. But when I'm reading and watching this news from East Turkestan, particularly the ones that are related to culture, I constantly have these flashbacks from my past experience in the Soviet Union. Well, first of all, the way the ethnic minorities are represented in China through music is very similar to the Soviet representation. Media in the Soviet Union was used as propaganda as early as from 1930s. So there is one very old video that is called 3 Songs about Lenin, and that was made, that was shot in 1932, and it also shows, an Uyghur girl dancing. How shall I don't know why do I have all these things down? I think it's yeah. Oh, okay, I'll just show this from here. I don't know how to. Can somebody help me? I should close this ad, I guess, but I don't see this. I want to play this short video from here. Okie dokie. Not possible. Yes, possible. We just okay, because this ad down there. Yes, good. Thank you. Now it should.
Ah, I see.
No.
One moment.
Okay.
So,
oh,
there we go.
Here we go. I think these advertisements, they're really kind of disturbing. Yes. Okay. So in that video, you will see actually one of the first recordings of an Uyghur dancer performer. Just like in another video that we've seen, issued by a Chinese tourist company, the Uyghurs are dancing, happy children, sunny day, everybody's, happy about the situation. But this film, this documentary is very interesting in many perspectives, because at the beginning of this film, we see how, we see also the projection of how Uyghurs have become, or I should say maybe Central Asian Soviet ethnicities should become civilized and give up the backward quote unquote practices. And we see at the beginning of the movie how the imams are praying, and we hear the azan. We see the Oriental woman wearing burqa or hijab, and how she's unveils her face and then becomes educated and reads the book, and all this really kind of goes in line with whatever happening in China right now. Yes, this assault to the religion and kind of showing the correct way of living. Yeah, as in this poster, you can see there is an Oriental girl, Central Asian girl, and there is a imam, or I don't know who is a clerk who is trying to offer a Quran to read, and he's like asking, when have you like turned your back to this religion? And she says, I gave it up since I started reading this book. And on the book there is a Lenin, of course, in title. So just like in China, in the Soviet Union, all the religious practices were banned, and those who practiced were persecuted and sent to the labor camps. And actually, I did some research on Sufism in the middle of the 1990s, and I traveled around across Central Asia. I went to I went like in different spaces, holy spaces in Kazakhstan, as well as in Uzbekistan, which was very traditionally had this very traditionally strong religious practices, but I was not able to find a single Sufi. So it means that since 1920s until the 1990s, there was like such an erasure of all this tradition and culture and religious practices that they just ceased to exist. Yeah, of course now there is a revivification of this culture and practices, and you will find plenty of them, but not then. But I should really stress that the interest of Russians towards Uyghurs became very like prominent in 1930s. But history goes back to the 19th century, yes, when the Uyghurs established their independent state of Yetishar. Russian authorities became anxious that Uyghurs would seek British military support and incite uprisings in the Russian Turkestan. So in 1871, oh, I think, no, this is not representing, I should probably just place with this. So in 1871, Russian army crossed the border and occupied the Taranchi Sultanate, which is in the Kulja region. And 10 years later, because of Chinese diplomatic pressure, Russians withdrew from the Kulja region, and they signed the Treaty of St. Petersburg, which permitted the people to travel from Chinese border into the Russian borders. And many Muslims living in Kulja crossed the border because they were frightened about the consequences that they might have from the Chinese army, the massacre that they've just lived because of this large uprisal in Central Asia. So they about 70,000 families crossed the border. So approximately 300,000 Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. But from the establishment, and so Russia also got a little bit of land with this to accommodate this community. But from the establishment of Soviet Union, Soviets also sought to control these borders. Yeah, and unsurprisingly, they use Uyghur minority to manipulate with the region's politics. So after the Soviet Revolution, some Uyghurs who were living in the in Soviet Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, were given access to higher education. So there were Uyghur schools that were established in Kazakhstan, for instance, in early 1930s, and the Uyghur Theater was established in 1933, and this year they're celebrating their 90th anniversary. So on the one hand, Uyghurs gained chance to represent themselves in different art forms like theater and music, but on the other hand, they were products of the Soviet order. So their expression of nationhood had to reflect official ideology dictated by the Communist Party, which was national in form and socialist in content. And that was outlined by Stalin. So one of the most striking distortion of Uyghur history I found actually in the first opera created by an Uyghur composer, Kuduz Kurjemyarov, and this opera is called Nazugum. So, and that's my last example. So the story of Nazugum dates back to the 1820s rebellion in Kashgar against the Qing Empire. So when the leader of this rebellion, Jahangir Hoja, was captured and all the male rebels were killed, the women, all women were given as wives to Jungar or Kalmyk people who were nomadic allies to the Qing army. A woman called Nazugum managed to escape from her masters twice. At the second time, she actually killed her potential rapist. But when she was captured the third time, she was publicly decapitated. It is believed that Nazugum was a very, talented woman, and she created several songs, and these songs have been transmitted orally for about 50 years, and then they were transcribed by an Uyghur poet, Bilal Nazim, at the end of the 19th century, and they were actually published in Russian and in Uyghur at the end of the 19th century. So for any Uyghur, the name of Nazugum and her songs conveyed and still convey a symbolic meaning of freedom, resistance against oppressors, and love for the motherland. And so because she is at the same time a reproducer of communal and national boundaries, and she is a symbol of her people purity and a kind of a model of communal values, and she is at the same time a warrior. So she's kind of shifting the gender roles here, because her male counterparts are unable to protect the female, part of the people. So she is taking up this struggle into her hands, and she actually prefers to die rather than to give her body to an outside aggressor. And so there is a particular reference in the poem that she remains pure, she's not been raped. And so the first Uyghur opera, is about this woman Nazgum, and it's focused on life and the death of Nazgum. But the basic storyline which has very clearly anti-colonial message, is changed. In the opera, it is distracted by the addition of Uyghur wealthy village lord named Bai Manan, and this Bai acts against his own people, and he helps a Qing army officer to capture Nazgum. And also there is and this adds a very important overtone of a social struggle, and shifts this anti-colonial message quite openly. Also, there is another, a character introduced into the opera, and this character is Chinese Liu Chun. And so this is a good Chinese, actually, who is helping Nazgum to escape from the prison. And he is also he is a character very important for the opera, because he introduces a new subject into the story, because and this subject was central for Soviet Union in 1950s when this opera was created. That's a subject of friendship between peoples of Uyghurs and Chinese, or the or in this case, Soviet Uyghurs and Communist Chinese. So what is interesting, that there are two versions of this opera in the end. So in one version, the original one, Nazgum dies at the hands of Loya, the Chinese, just like in original story. And this plot corresponds to the original story. And then after, the first performance of this this opera, we could find some critiques of it, and these critiques were published in Soviet Union's central newspapers like Sovetskaya Muzika or Soviet Music, which everybody read, and the other one was also published in a central book on arts in Kazakhstan, and it says that there was a critique about the lack of dramaticism in opera and the unclear role of Liu Chun, this good Chinese. And in the end of this article, you can see very important suggestions of how to make this opera better, sound better. So it says, what is the point of the character of Liu Chun, dramatically speaking? Why shouldn't he, after protecting Nazgum, also be next to her at the last moment, cementing with blood the great friendship between the Uyghur and the Chinese? So interesting suggestion, isn't it? Considering the old story of this resistance of Uyghurs against Chinese. So, but Kuzhemyarov has nothing else to do but to fix this ending, and he is completely changing the story and makes indeed Nazugum die by actually protecting Lu Chun, protecting the Chinese. So we have a complete reversal, of the story and alteration of the historical events and facts, which is quite interesting. But my point, I know that we're out of time. My major point of this talk was that the Chinese Communist deliberate destruction of cultural heritage has its roots in the Soviet communist regime. Yeah, and it has this kind of a form of cultural and this kind of form of cultural warfare continues today. Yeah, with population being frightened and their history being attacked and the very identity changed and questioned. And maybe I should stop on this. Yeah, thank you very much. If you have questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have about 15 or so minutes for questions. So does anyone here in this space have any questions? If you do, we'll be sure to get a microphone to you. Just please raise your hand.
I was just wondering if the word mukum was related to the Turkish makam, which means a scale or a mode.
Yes, absolutely. But originally this term comes from Arabic and it means a place, a station. And in terms of, religious language, it represents rather a spiritual kind of station. Yeah, and mukam as a whole genre, as a structure, each part of the mukam represents this different spiritual experiences. Yeah, but Uyghur mukam is quite different from the Turkish one. And if you want, we have a specialist of mukam here sitting there. It's my mother, Alibakiva Tamara. She's written a book about Uyghur mukams, but it was published in Russian in 1988. Yeah, she's transcribed mukams. Yeah. Other questions?
Thank you very much, Adalyat. And I just wanted to comment that, there is a saying that the history of China is unpredictable. So what we've been experiencing as an nation, the dramatic turn in history, in historic interpretation. So whoever comes changes that narrative according to his or her, agenda. So right before we've been, China was saying that they came to civilize us, that they're barbaric. Now they're trying to appropriate the cultural heritage, which is integral part of the genocide as well. So I think that from that perspective, it's very interesting because China portrays itself as a country which never colonized people, which is so friendly, a savior, and it portrays itself as a bastion towards Western hegemony, which is completely false narrative. And we know this very well firsthand. Thank you, Adalyat.
But I think Russians have been doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, there is nothing new under the sky, right?
Yeah.
It's divide and conquer. They might be enhancing it even more with technology, which is available right now. But being, under Soviet occupation, we know that, Russians tried to do that same, and Chinese, they copy-paste, copy-paste strategy, but maybe even more cruel, even more inhumane and more sophisticated.
I didn't understand why a Russian composer would want to undermine Uyghur nationalism in terms of, to pretend that she was friends with a Chinese man. I mean, why would they support China's suppression of the Uyghurs?
Well, I actually had to leave out all the historical background of the composition of this opera, because it was composed in 1955. And if you remember, Chinese have just taken the full control over the East Turkestan in 1949. So and they signed the contract with Stalin, about friendship and support. So it was very important for Russians to show this that the Uyghurs themselves are pro-communist, pro-Chinese, and that they are willing to create musical arts that are going in line with the official narrative. Yeah, so it was very important. The timing is very important. But I've actually published recently research on this subject on Kuzhemyarov, because Kuzhemyarov was the first Uyghur composer. You have to remember that he raised because of what happened in East Turkestan. Yeah, and because Stalin wanted to have his own loyal cultural elite that is easy to manipulate, basically. Yeah, and together they are creating new narrative. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you for your question. Yeah. Thank you.
I was going to ask about the Dastan tradition that you talked about. So I know that there are a lot of Uyghur Dastans, but this is this like an oral tradition that is being passed among generations, like a tradition within the family, or is there actual people? I think you use the term Destanchi.
Yeah.
Is there actual people with this profession, or?
Well, usually those who sing Dastans, they also perform mukams, because this is more kind of professional, towards the professional side or way of performing. Yes, these are not simple songs. You need to have a very good memory, because usually they are very long. They're telling very slowly the entire story. Yes, but what is important about Dastans is that there is entire memory in them. And they are very literary, sophisticated. It's not just a simple storytelling. Yeah, they have very beautiful literary, devices used in there. And now it's all forbidden to perform. And even for having some of the dastans about Sadir Palvan, about great heroes, if somebody finds texts with those names, you are getting persecuted. You're just sent to camps. Yeah, simply for that, or simply for performing, or even trying to, or even talking about this. Yeah, unfortunately.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I don't know if I answered your question, actually. I'm not sure. Yes, but we can talk after.
I think we have time for just one more question. So does anyone else have a question here?
Do you have any online?
No.
I have one question. So in East Turkestan right now going on genocide, everybody knows. For example, since 2016, we couldn't speak to our family. We don't know news about our family members. Like my wife's two brothers in the jail, sentenced life, and my family also in the concentration camp. We're trying to raise our awareness, raise our voice in Canada and internationally, but it's not enough. We couldn't. Recently, I'm watching news Palestinian issue, Israeli issue is all over the world. It's very popular issue, but those issues is front of the camera happening in our country right now in East Turkestan. All the genocide happening behind the curtain. So how do we raise awareness like other issue?
Thank you. Yeah, maybe that's another aspect that we didn't touch today, that we have this collective trauma within diaspora. This is daily experience for us. We live in and out on a daily basis, and it affects the mental health of everyone, especially exiled community. Seeing things on the camera And I just came like a bit earlier, and I saw students protesting and doing this pro-Palestinian rally, I believe. And I salute that that youth involvement and being social conscious about things happening around, and they not staying apolitical or impartial. But from our perspective, I find this very ironic that we have seen 16,000 and more mosques being destroyed. You cannot say Assalamu alaikum in Turkestan. This is forbidden. Islam proclaimed as mental illness. You cannot name your children Muhammad or Fatima because it's something. And yet we see that, quote unquote, Arab street or the, Muslim world, Ummah, by large, is siding with China. We have seen Mahmoud Abbas going to China and officially proclaiming support for concentration camps, saying this is very good thing, they're doing it. We have seen Saudi king going there and saying this is internal affair of China. This is like disconnection between what is happening to us and what was the action or inaction on the part of the global response. And I would say, the countries which are by large, in majority, are so-called like with the predominant Muslim population are supporting China at UN, and countries like, Western Hemisphere, the countries with transparency, accountability, Western, concept of democracy and accountability are very pro-Uyghur, and they staying and they standing up. So there is big discourse, and it's big disbalance. And we as a diaspora, we are seeing it, and we kind of like asking ourselves, is Quran is the same in East Turkestan and in Palestine? Is Muslim people are the same, or is it like second, third category? Like, why is that? People like, this is my personal observation. This is not my, I'm not talking on behalf of any organization. This is purely my personal observation. So I wish I can see more youth, more young people being so vocal and advocating for the people of Uyghurs. Not just because we are Muslims, or not because of, just because we are human beings and we deserve the same treatment and the same attention. So it's, then again, on the other side, we are seeing in Eritrea within the last 5-10 years, like more than 1 million people been killed. In Congo, the ongoing conflict is going on for 40 years. And who is talking about it? Who is like, so maybe it's more profound. Maybe it's in our human subconsciousness that we do not feel close to some events or some, genocide, like I can say, happening long, far away, and you have never heard, and you don't feel that attachment. Maybe that's an issue. I'm not trying to justify why we're not doing it as Canadians and why maybe we should do this more. But maybe I would advocate you as a Canadian, as a taxpayer, start asking questions. Do you know that your pension plan is being invested in China? Every Canadian contributes to that pension plan. And only Quebec province invested more than 30 billion Canadian dollars in Chinese stock markets. Are we asking our superiors, our financial gurus, why are we doing and profiting from genocide, for example? Or when you go to the nearest shopping mall and you see made in China, will you be willing to buy it knowing that there is slave labor behind it? Are we asking ourselves, why is that t-shirt cost less than a cup of coffee, for God's sake? It costs like $4 or $5. When you go to Starbucks, you can buy fancy coffee for $7, $8. Are we asking these questions? So maybe for in my interpretation, the first question will be ask yourself, educate yourself, and reach out to us as a diaspora. We are here. We are here to educate. We are here to inform you. And after all that you're hearing and knowing and learning about it, and you're still continuing that, then you become a complicit. That's my understanding. Thank you for your question.
There is another question. There is a question there.
Thank you so much once again to our panelists for speaking. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take any more questions at the moment. We do have to get to a documentary, but thank you so much. We can address them during the little Q&A afterwards. But thank you once again to everyone who joined us both online and here in the space. We're going to close up the online space just now, but please do stick around if you're here in person for the documentary screening and the subsequent photo exhibit. So thank you again. And we will catch you at the next one.
Thank you.